Hello, and welcome to the next installment of the Security Middle East Magazine webinar series. My name is Daniel Norman. I'm chairperson for the Security Middle East webinar series, and also European Middle East Director for the Information Security Forum. I'm really excited today to be joined by a couple of individuals from Pentera, and we'll be exploring the topic of operationalizing red teaming, which is a topic that's very close to my heart, exploring areas such as resilience, essentially identifying vulnerabilities and doing that in a way that maximizes the return on investment. Now, in terms of the speakers, so I'm excited today to be joined by Oren Kaplan. He's one of the senior directors for Middle East and Africa at Pentera. He's a distinguished security expert. He possesses more than 15 years of comprehensive experience within the cybersecurity domain and has expertise across a variety of roles, both strategic and technical as well. Our second speaker is Hardeep Singh. He's a senior principal security engineer at Pentera. He's, again, got a tremendous amount of experience, over 10 years of experience in this space, specializing in vulnerability assessments, pen testing, threat intelligence, network security. And I believe both of these individuals will be able to give quite a dynamic perspective on the topic of red teaming and all of the other sort of subtopics that contribute towards that. As always, we will be taking questions during this session, so please do add them to the question pane, which is in the bottom of the screen there, and we'll endeavour to get to them at the bottom of the presentation. Moreover, we will be running some polls today, so please do feel free to contribute your ideas, your thoughts, and I'm sure the Pentera team will be addressing some of the findings during the session today. So without further ado, I'm more than happy to hand over to Oren and Hardeep. Over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar series. And today we're going to talk about how to include automation in your red team exercises. So we all are very familiar with red teaming. It's an extremely important action activity that should happen in our mind in almost every organization around the world, and should happen frequently. What we've done, we basically were able to basically show what we're going to do today is show you how you can use Pentera for red teaming. So Pentera can be used for many other things. Pentera is an automated penetration testing platform that does security validation red teaming. So the concept of today is how to show you how you can utilize and show you real life examples that you can actually take back and how to use Pentera and how to basically automate your red team activities. All right. So without further ado, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just ask Hardeep to share his screen, and then we're going to start by showing you. And there it is. All right, great. So like Daniel introduced us, my name is Oren Kaplan. I lead the business in Middle East and Africa, based out of Dubai. With me is Mr. Hardeep Singh, our principal sales engineer. And like I said, we're going to review some concepts of red team, show you a few examples of how to use Pentera in your red team activities, and kind of summary and talk about everything that we just said, and kind of talk about kind of a few highlights. All right. So let's start with the agenda. We're going to talk just to align everyone on what is red teaming exactly, how to look at automation of red teaming, and how we as Pentera decided to kind of develop it to that end. Show a few examples of how to use it with Pentera and how to use the automation red team, and talk about what happens after you run the activity. What are the deliverables, the action items, the analysis, and then basically talk about how Pentera can really assist you in doing all these red team activities. Even if it's done manual, it can really complement what you're doing by including automation as well. So the plan is not really replace any red team activity that is done today. All right, so really briefly at high level, what is red teaming? So basically, red teaming is a practice of which you're testing your own defenses You're emulating the adversary inside your organization, starting from scanning, enumerating, looking at vulnerabilities, trying to bypass controls like an EDR, like an NDR, maybe try to exfiltrate files and test um, your your firewall. And the idea here is to really validate your security controls, right? To know that once the attackers will come, and we all know that they will come eventually, that everything you've implemented in your cybersecurity posture is actually working as intended, it's optimized, and your SOC, your EDR, your XDR, all of them are identifying the attack and mitigating in real time. So that's the idea of red teaming. Obviously, blue team also play a big role here because in many cases, there's one team that emulates adversarial and one team that emulates the whole SOC team, blue team that is there to respond and basically mitigate the attack. So that's red team as a concept. And and this is kind of where we wanted to talk about red teaming. Now let's kind of jump into what is automation of red teaming, right? Because what I mentioned until today is until now, it's pretty much how it's done manually. You have certain individuals that represent blue team and red team. So how do we actually automate it? So the way we at Pentera decided to automate red teaming is basically by doing everything and anything an attacker would do, only with an automated mindset. So how does it usually work? What you see here on the left is a pretty much high-level activity of automation, red teaming automation done by Pentera. So if you start at 12 o'clock at network recon, so the first thing an attacker will do, usually stepping into a new environment, imagine that they did phishing, social engineering. They were able to compromise one host. The first thing they would do, they would start with network recon, understanding what devices, what IPs they have in that VLAN. Start looking for vulnerabilities, right? For known vulnerabilities, for maybe zero-day vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, understanding exactly what's going on, what's the attack surface, maybe and someone's running a Windows 7 there, maybe someone's running an unpatched service. So looking, first of all, for kind of the low-hanging fruit. In parallel, they will try to sniff credentials using some misconfigurations in the network. We'll try to, if they are able to sniff an NTLM hash or two, they were able to try to crack these passwords. So hackers today have GPUs together with them, so they'll try to crack passwords. Same thing for Pentera. Pentera will do techniques. We'll start kind of like emulating techniques like relay, pass the hash. Pentera will try to emulate malware injection, right? To try to bypass the EDR, very similar to, right, exactly what a red team would do. We'll try to bypass the EDR. We'll try to use file list-based attacks, file-based attacks, lol-based attacks, and see how the blue team and the security controls respond. Of course, data gathering, once you get into an endpoint, bypass the EDR, you'll try to extract information from it to emulate kind of some kind of a ransomware attack, right? Try to encrypt a file, try to exfiltrate a file, use it to lateral move, let's say from one VLAN to another, from a server VLAN to user VLAN, pivoting, privilege escalation. Basically, the entire life cycle of emulating an attack would happen with Pentera the same way a manual red team will do. Pentera will do it only automatically and on the entire network. Now, a few things just to highlight. When you automate red teaming, it's very important in our mind to have a machine that does this in an agentless fashion. The reason is that we believe that when attackers attack the organization, they never use agents, right? They don't have agents installed in the environment in order to really showcase how they're moving from one place to another, right? That they compromise a host or they compromise a server or a service, and then from there they basically lateral move and progress the attack. So when you want to emulate a red team activity in an automated fashion, we strongly believe it should be with an agentless approach, and this is exactly how Pentera works. Another thing where we really believe in that you have to make it real, meaning when you simulate red team activity, when you simulate attacks, it doesn't really challenge your security controls in the blue team the way you should expect, right? It's like you can't compare real life in front of simulation. So we really believe in doing it for real, exploiting vulnerabilities for real, trying to crack credentials for real, and really doing everything so you can really test your controls the best way. Safety, obviously, when you include automation through certain things in your environment, you want to make sure they're safe by design. So each and everything Pentera will do, starting from identifying vulnerabilities, exploiting them, cracking passwords, will be safe by design. And we can definitely talk about the safety features of Pentera. And obviously, you want to make sure that an automation machine should be very, very easy to use. So Pentera is extremely comprehensive. So just to explain kind of what the life cycle of automation of red teaming. Move to the next slide. Yes. All right, this is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. I'm sure you all are familiar with it. This is basically talks about the techniques, tactics, and procedures that each and every attack has in the organization. So starting from initial access, top left, and then you see all the sub-techniques of initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation. So when you run a red team, you should pretty much look at this framework and pretty much follow it, right? Because you want to see that all these different techniques and adversarial activity would be emulated and will be done in your environment, and see how your blue team / security controls are responding to that. So for example, when you try to use discovery, you'd imagine that let's say some machine that started discovering a lot of devices in your network, you would expect the SOC team to see that immediately, right? Because it's something that doesn't happen naturally. So, but what we see in many cases when red team is done manually, that a lot of time organizations are looking at this list and look at it in a vertical perspective. So for example, tomorrow morning, an organization tests discovery only, and then only lateral movement, and then only collection, and then only privilege escalation. And by testing these things kind of like vertically or in a silo, it doesn't really represent a real adversarial activity. A real adversarial activity should look like this. It should start from one place and end in another place, right? Each and every action has has a relation to the action beforehand. This is why usually when you hear about attackers, that we talk about kill chains, right? The chain of the attack, where it started, how it moved throughout the different types of verticals until it reached the kind of the goal. So, for example, when you run a test in your environment, you would want to start from initial access, because an attacker cannot reach a point where they can execute a payload or maintain persistence unless they have initial access. So when you run in a red team activity, we extremely believe that you need to do it, and it's a journey. It's like a chain of events that happen, and you should not test it in a siloed approach. And this is exactly how automation works and helps you really go through these different details. You can move slide, yes. All right, so after this kind of brief explanation about automation of red teaming, would love to hear from you guys. How often are you currently running red team engagements? We meet customers all the time. Some of them run red team activities once a year. Some of them do it more frequently. So basically, would love to hear from you. How often do you guys are running red team engagements? Is it never? I hope not. Annually, which we mostly hear, biannually, monthly, weekly. So really, really up to you guys to please, if you can take a few minutes, a few seconds to answer this poll. All right. Yes, I see a lot of answers. So I can tell you that when we meet prospects, usually what we hear is that it's done every year, maybe every 2 years. So this is kind of what we're hearing. I'm really, really curious to know, how often do you guys do it yourself? All right, answers. So I see 33% of the form here said biannually, which is great. I see that a few organizations are never doing it. Some do it weekly, which is amazing. It means that probably there's a red team inside, monthly as well. So biannually and annually, biannually seems like the best answer here, which is great. I think we have a very advanced kind of audience here today, which is excellent. Great. All right, so now we want to move to probably to show you a few examples how including automation in your red team activities can really help you. Even if you have like an internal red team, how red team can really use Pentera to validate the controls and to help in front of the blue team. And we want to give you real life examples of what we see with our customers and how Pentera can really help in this fashion. So for that, I want to introduce Mr. Hardeep Singh, our principal sales engineer, to take you over a few of the examples.
Right.
Over to you,
Thank you.
Hardeep.
Thank you, Oren. Hello, everyone. As Daniel and Oren introduced me already, so I'll not, take much time in introducing myself. For the remaining part of the presentation, see, till now, what we understood is that how you can, employ automation when it comes to red teaming. But one of the key aspects when it comes to red teaming is testing yourself from an attacker's perspective, acting like an attacker or mimicking an attacker's behavior, right? And that can mean anything, right? So shall I just start wearing dark clothes, start wearing hoodies, start hiding from the law? Let's understand what exactly do we mean when we say testing yourself from an attacker's perspective and how Pentera will do those kind of red teaming engagements. First example is, what if an attacker compromises initial network access, which can happen in a variety of different ways? Let's understand what are those ways. One of the ways is that maybe someone compromises your Wi-Fi. Your Wi-Fi SSD gets compromised. Maybe the physical security breach happens. Someone is able to bypass your physical security and able to connect his or her laptop or a desktop or anything like that. Any of those variety of different things because of which initial network access has been gained by an attacker. Now, once that happens, let's understand how Pentera will emulate exactly that in the fashion of a red teaming. First of all, we will run a black box assessment. In that black box assessment, Pentera is a software, basically. Pentera is a software which you can install on a gaming laptop, you can install it on a server, you can install it as a virtual machine as well. Do that, and then connect Pentera into any of the VLANs. Maybe a user VLAN, maybe a guest VLAN, which we are thinking will get compromised or can get compromised. We are going to assume that. Now, once that happens, let's understand, first of all, this is the console of Pentera. These are the different assessments which are provided. And right now we are concentrating on the black box assessment. Once we run a black box assessment from this initial network compromise perspective, this is how Pentera shows the results. This is a small kill chain of an attack. In this kill chain, which Pentera generates automatically, it runs through the systems, it tries to understand what kind of vulnerabilities, misconfigurations are there, and then ultimately tries to exploit them just like a real attacker would do. In this kill chain, anything like this broken shield, which you will see, that's a problem. A vulnerability, a misconfiguration, any loophole that can be exploited. This trophy is always Pentera's action against it. So here, after we connected Pentera in the network, it says that it discovered a problem that hosts can be forced to authenticate by a rogue server, which means a man in the middle kind of attack is possible. It is a network level misconfiguration because of which a man in the middle attack is possible. Look what Pentera is doing in the next step. It is automatically saying that because of that problem, it was able to capture credentials over SMB. Everything in the skill chain will be clickable and you will get full context just like this. So what exactly Pentera captured? Pentera is saying that it captured a username called Aisha, and it also captured the credentials, which is NTLM-v2 password hash of Aisha's password. Now, at any point of time, if an attacker gains such kind of information, like a password hash, attacker will try to crack it, like in an offline manner, in a permutation combination manner, try to reverse engineer it to maybe get the clear text password. Look at the next step. The next step is exactly that, where Pentera is saying it was able to crack the user's hash, and it took about 1.749 seconds. Now we have Aisha's password. So this is a very, very clear indication of how initial network compromise can lead to a user compromise, and how you can test this phase of the attack by just connecting Pentera in the network and running a black box test, no credentials, nothing. You are exactly emulating what an attacker would do if an attacker has gained initial access. But that's the first phase of testing. But because attackers, when they attack, there are multiple phases of the attack. This is just the initial network compromise. Let's go a little deeper. What if a user gets compromised? A normal user, which doesn't have any privileges, as that's why I mentioned least privileges here, and a user gets compromised. Well, which can happen in variety of ways. Maybe the user was a victim of a phishing attack. Maybe there was a leaked credential related to a domain, related to a company in deep web, dark web. Maybe some password stealer got downloaded on the victim's machines. Variety of different ways, again, where a user gets compromised. Let's say a username password which doesn't have any privileges. What are we going to do this time? This time, we are going to run a gray box assessment. In that gray box assessment, we are targeting servers, workstations, Active Directory, things like that. And this time, we are going to provide a user to Pentera because we are emulating exactly what will happen if a user gets compromised. In this example, we will provide the username Fatima to Pentera. Now, what happens? Pentera will automatically, first of all, same screen. This time we are concentrating on this gray box. Now, what happens here? In this scenario, the kill chain looks slightly bigger. Of course, the deeper you will go, the attacks will get more complicated, and the automation will play a bigger role, because now Pentera is automatically progressing the attack, and your red teaming is becoming easier and easier, where all these actions where someone has to take manually, Pentera is doing automatically. Let's zoom in into it. When we zoom in, first of all, Pentera will show you that, okay, you provided Fatima's credentials. Then Pentera went ahead and validated whether Fatima's credentials are valid. How it does it? It goes to domain controller, tries to authenticate, and it says Fatima is a valid user. Using that, Pentera says on a machine in my scope, which is 110.32, it discovered a CVE, a critical CVE called print nightmare. Now, what it is saying in the next step, it says it was able to exploit that vulnerability. But it doesn't just tell you that, because providing full context, full forensics is exactly what Pentera's purpose is. This is how it exploited it. It says it was able to upload a malware to the host. Host is that. And at the same time, it tells me that the reason why it was able to upload the malware, because the endpoint protection, or EDR, allowed writing malicious payload to the disk. Now, you will get full context that what was the file which got injected, which was the path where it got injected, and everything. What is the next step? It also shows you what was the code that it executed so that the malware got downloaded. You will see the code. You will see that the malware is actually getting installed and making a call back to Pentera as well. This is exactly what it shows here. It says malware got installed and it called back to Pentera on this port. And at the same time, it keeps telling me that the reason why this is happening, that the malware got installed and it did a callback, because antivirus did not block the malicious payload. Hence, Pentera was able to escalate privileges and it was able to create a user account on that machines, meaning an admin account. Hence, it was able to gain admin access to that machine. So it all started with a normal user. So here we are emulating that if a normal user gets compromised, what will happen? Pentera automatically figured out that in this environment, privilege escalation is possible on this machine. Hence, Pentera was able to create a local account, an admin account, and it shows you here, this is the account and this was created by Pentera. But the testing doesn't stop there. Again, this is the second phase of the attack. Let's move on a little bit ahead. And by the way, I can see that multiple questions are coming in the Q&A section. Please go ahead, feel free to keep putting them there. We will definitely answer them towards the end of the webinar, which is going to be in next 5 to 7 minutes or 8 minutes. Now, like I was saying, this is the second phase. Let's go one layer deeper. What if an admin gets compromised? When I say admin, I mean a local admin or a user which has remote code execution privileges. Again, the reasons can be exactly the reason which I showed you. Maybe there is privilege escalation possibility, leaked credentials. Again, all those different scenarios because of which, let's say, an admin gets compromised. In this scenario, again, we are going to use gray box assessment. We are going to target, again, servers, workstations, and this time we are providing a privileged user to Pentera called Khalid. Now, this time, again, we are concentrating on gray box, but let's understand what happens. This is the kill chain of an attack using a privileged credential. Let's zoom in into it. Similar to how we saw in the previous example, Pentera is saying, you provided Khalid to me. I validated that Khalid is a valid user. And then it says, I realized that Khalid has privileged RCE capabilities, which means automatically Pentera figured out that it is a privileged user. Now, if it is a privileged user, of course, you can go ahead and do remote code execution. But that's where your endpoint security, your network security should kick in because they should try to stop the remote code execution. This time, Pentera is doing a ransomware attack. It says here, it generated an encryption key. Now, usually if a real ransomware attack happens and an encryption key is generated, after that, the next step is encryption of the files. But we don't want to actually encrypt the files of the machine because that will not be safe. And then we will just, locking out all the users. So that's why the payloads of Pentera are modified so that they act real, but at the same time, they don't harm your systems. For example, here, this is what is the next step after generating the encryption key. It says, I enumerated files on the host, which means it created a copy of the files. It will show you the files as well. And in the next step, it is encrypting the copy. It is not encrypting the real user files or real desktop files or the real server files. It is encrypting the copy that it created in the previous step. Now, why did we do that? Well, we wanted to do a real attack, first of all. Second, we didn't want to harm the actual data. The third reason is, what about this? Your endpoint security or your network security, they shouldn't care if it is the real data which is being encrypted by ransomware or the copy of the data. They should just be able to stop it. But they didn't. Hence, Pentera is saying it was able to encrypt the files and it also was able to emulate deletion of shadow copies because ransomwares, they just don't encrypt your data. At the same time, they steal your data and they make sure that the data is not recoverable. So they delete shadow copies. Again, we don't want to delete the shadow copies, but we want to test it. Look at here. What is the command that the exploit is running? It is running the shadow copy deletion command, but it is putting /? in the end, which means it is testing the usage of that command, but it still gets loaded into the memory and it should be stopped by this endpoint security, but it didn't. Hence, Pentera was able to emulate deletion of shadow copies as well. And finally, it says it was able to complete ransomware attack. See, what we are testing here are different vectors. We are testing there is a vulnerability, there is a misconfiguration, there is a misconfiguration on the security control. So all these variety of different ways are being exploited and you are being made aware of those so that you can understand where exactly is the weakness. The weakness is not always a CVE. Weakness is not always a misconfiguration. It is any loophole that can give an attacker more information about the network or let attacker propagate the attack. And that's exactly what we tested in these 3 different assessments. And you can do it in an automated manner, in a continuous manner, over and over again, because network changes, new attacks come in, new TTPs, and Pentera will keep on automatically testing all those things. And it says completed the ransomware attack. We saw all these different types of examples, right? We saw example of initial user compromise, escalated privilege compromise, a normal user compromise. But after all these assessments, what exactly you get out of it? First of all, the kill chains are amazing, which gives you a lot of context. You understand what kind of a path an attacker can follow. But in the end, it'll also tell you that, okay, I did all the assessments, I did all the attacks. Now you need to fix all these problems. Now you will get the list of all the vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, as well the problems on the security controls. For example, look at this list. This first problem is a network level misconfiguration. This is a CVE. Sorry, this is a CVE. This is a problem on EDR. So you will get like a mixture of all the problems in your network, which can be clubbed together, just like how we saw in those examples. But this is the interesting part. Look at, there is a remediation priority attached to everything as well. And remediation priority has nothing to do with severity of the problem, because severity is very generic. The severity based on CVSS score is a very generic thing. This priority gets calculated on the basis of impact of the problem, because now we know exactly where the problems are falling in a kill chain. So we know if I stop it at the root cause, that has more impact. So based on where exactly everything fits in the whole scheme of things, that's how you will get the remediation priority, which is ultimately signifying which problem has the more risk. You will get a resilience score based on all the actions that Pentera did. How did your organization behave? You will see the resilience score based on that, whether Pentera was able to compromise a critical asset, whether Pentera was able to compromise, it was able to move laterally, maybe it was able to bypass an EDR. Based on all those different things, you will get a resilience score, which you will be able to track over time as well, so that you can understand just by looking at the score how the resilience of your organization or the cybersecurity posture is progressing. Then, after giving you the problems, it also gives you the instructions to solve those problems as well. There will be an inbuilt remediation wiki for each and every problem which you saw in the previous slide, which will explain, first of all, what the problems is, like how it can be exploited, and step-by-step recommendations. So step-by-step recommendation along with the screenshots, just like how you're seeing it here, that's how the remediation instructions will be provided as well. So it comes like full cycle. First of all, it gives you the ability to test all these different kinds of loopholes in your organization at different stages. Initial user compromise, normal user compromise, escalated user compromise, and then it will use those stages to go ahead and test everything in your network, just like a real attacker would do. And that's how you will go ahead and start improving your cybersecurity, improving your red teaming exercises, because now a major chunk of your red teaming activities are being automatically handled by Pentera. Whereas your red team can concentrate on more logical things, which cannot be automated, reviewing business logic, anything which requires human intuition. That's what a manual red teamer can do. Now, To summarize everything what we discussed today, I'll bring back Oren to understand, to just summarize that how Pentera fits into the whole red teaming scheme. I think we understood that in today's presentation, but let's just summarize it, how exactly Pentera can fit into the whole red teaming program. Oren, if you can come back, please.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Ardeep. Great stuff. So let's see. So what we want is pretty much to summarize how automation can really help you when you do red team activities. And if you're not doing red teaming, definitely we strongly recommend doing it. So first of all, one of the biggest advantages of automation is basically to have something run for you. And we know how small, how let's say there's not a lot of staff in the cybersecurity teams, IT teams, and in many cases, you want to automate as much as you can. So definitely have a machine that runs these activities for you, keeps the blue team in check, keeps the security controls in check, is very, very important. So automation is key today. I mean, attackers are using automation against us, and we definitely want to use automation for us as well. So that's the first thing why Pentera can really help you there. Second thing, cover the entire attack surface. So usually when manual red teamers are actually working, it's very hard for them to really cover the entire IT network, the entire environment. Why? Because if it's a 100-employee team, a 100-employee company, no worries. But if it's a large organization, so we're talking about hundreds, thousands of servers, thousands of workstations, routers, printers. The attack surface is tremendous. It's huge. You want to be able to test each and every device to understand whether your controls are actually protecting you, not only kind of in the crown jewels, but everywhere, right? So scaling, automation allows you to scale, software allows you to scale, and this is pretty much where we aim with Pentera, is how do you actually scale all this work and not just keep it very, very only sampling, but basically testing everything. How to automate different TTPs. So like we saw before, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, I'll talk about in a second, has many, many techniques and sub-techniques. You want to be able to automate it, right? Because like I said, you do it in scale and you do it across multiple devices. How do you actually emulate real ransomware strains? So as a part of Pentera, we really took a few ransomware strains like Maze, Conti, REvil, Lockbit, and Hardeep showed you that briefly, is that you can really emulate a real sequence of event and a process that a ransomware attack, ransomware group will actually use tomorrow morning, different ATPs, advanced persistent threats, so you can really, really do the same thing as the attackers are doing and test your blue team in front of these exact processes. So that's extremely important. And like I said, MITRE ATT&CK framework is something that we follow religiously. We believe that you should test MITRE ATT&CK framework. And like I showed you in the matrix before, not in a silo approach, but as a sequence of events, because an attack happens, it's a rolling it's a rolling ball, right? It's not just start somewhere in a silo. It really starts with one place and goes to another place and has a journey, a kill chain, a chain of events. So really, we believe that every time you test your environment, you should definitely use MITRE ATT&CK, and Pentera follows that religiously. So that's pretty much it for the presentation today. So I'll pass it on to Daniel, who can kind of guide us through the questions of the different questions that you have here in the Q&A session. Please, Daniel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Oren. Thank you, Hardeep, as well. I'd like to welcome you back on screen. We've got a number of questions that have come through on the chat and a few that I'd like to ask myself as well. We've got I would say, a spectrum of people on the call in terms of mature organizations to relatively immature. So for organizations that haven't done red teaming before, where do you recommend they start, and how would they make a business case to begin? And I'll ask Oren, what are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, so like I said before, we believe red teaming is mandatory today. One of the reasons is I think a lot of organizations are really focusing on how to defend, how to build more security controls, how to add more and more and more. And we see there's unlimited amount of solutions out there. But how do you know that the solutions that you have right now are actually working as planned, are actually optimized? This is, I think, is the main thing because a lot of when I meet CISOs, sometimes they have controls. They don't even know if it's working or not working. They don't know if should they remove it or not. So red team is extremely important. It allows you to really test yourself before the attackers test it for you. You actually know, and you can be more confident, right? There's never 100%, but you can be more confident that your SOC, your SIM, your EDR, your NDR, your firewalls are actually working and working as you want them to work. So definitely, I would think that the best business case to build is to explain that instead of buying more technology, is to actually what I have is to optimize that work of what I have, and basically know that when the next attack comes in, that I have some reason to be more, let's say, confident that my controls will basically work as planned.
Wonderful. And one of the questions from the audience asks, what makes red teaming so important and popular now? I think they're more concerned about red teaming being more hype. You know, I think we've been talking about red team, blue team, purple teams, yellow teams for a number of years now. So Hardy, what do you think's changed in terms of the threat landscape? Why is red teaming so important right now?
All right, so I guess the reason why it gets the hype, deservingly so, is because people are tired of just being the defenders on the defending side of things. Because from many years, it's all about putting a lot of effort, money, and time into the defense. Defense is endpoint security, network security, deception, SIM, SOC, everything. But still, the attacks keep on happening. So I think it's high time that we flip the script so that we can start testing ourselves from an attacker's perspective. And that's what red teaming brings, because till the time you are waiting for the attack to happen and then understand how good or bad your cybersecurity is, you are many steps behind an actual attacker. So that's why red teaming gets the hype, because now you have the ability to test yourself before an attack happens. But ultimately you are attacking yourself in a safe manner. You're not waiting for an attacker to come and attack yourself, and you're testing yourself ahead of time. So that's the way to stay ahead of the curve as well. I think that's why the hype is.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And then one other question here is, I liked your slide that you had, Hardeep, about the recommendations, the tactical and strategic investments or controls that you might want to consider implementing post red team exercise. But what kind of support can clients expect from Pentera after the engagement? Is there a continuous improvement plan or touch point with yourselves so that organizations don't just get the recommendations and they leave it there? How do you ensure that that the client you work with is actually going to improve post red team?
Right. So that's a very good question, because most of the cybersecurity products are like, okay, implement them and then just forget about it and then talk to the client at the time of renewal. But that's not really how you utilize the solution in an optimum manner. So what we do, first of all, we help with the implementation, we provide support, but apart from those generic things, we also have something called security validation advisory. Now, what that does, it dedicates one of the solutions architect from our side, who is normally like a very renowned pen tester, dedicated to every account that we have. Now, what we do, that purpose of that solution architect is to have like bi-weekly calls, monthly calls, try to review the results together, try to review the reports together, understand the remediation. Maybe Pentera is recommending some remediation, but it is not really working in the actual environment. So all those things where you can understand the solutions capability to the highest level and understand what kind of results it is generating. That's why that security validation advisory exists, and that is included with all of our products. So it's not like something like an optional thing which you can get. It is always included, and people always get that validation advisory so that you can utilize the solution to the maximum optimum value.
Okay, thank you. And one final question from my side is, I think a lot of organizations, when they consider investing in red teaming, is, do I need to allocate resource internally to support here? So how much of the client's resource and time do you need when running these red team exercises?
Right. So see, first of all, as you saw in the examples, which I was showing as well, everything is automated. So everything is automated and everything gets shown in the form of very clear text, user-friendly kill chain. So anyone who understands basic IT and network can review the results. And doing the assessment phase is just a one-time configuration. So first of all, if you have red teaming resources, it's good. You can just allocate them to just review the results, because Pentera is doing all the heavy lifting, all the assessments, all the attacks. And even if you don't have a red teamer in-house or something like that, then like I said, everything is understandable from a very clear text, plain English kind of manner. So even if you have someone who can understand basic IT and network, just the reviewing the results part, that's where you will need some time. So ultimately, you don't really need much resources, because Pentera is doing everything in an automated manner and showing you everything, served on a plate.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, look, I think we've come to the end of our time with the presentations and questions here. Any closing statements from yourself, Oren, Hardeep, to summarize the presentation today?
Just to reiterate, first of all, thank you all of for coming. Just to reiterate that Red Team, we believe Red Team is extremely important. Automation is something that everyone can please be needs to incorporate. Do it as frequently as possible, because network is very dynamic today. Everything changes much more rapidly than it used to. And we really recommend including automation when you look at red teaming, especially if you're a large organization. That would be extremely important and easier to run.
And what about yourself, Hardeep? Any final comments?
No, I think Oren summarized it perfectly. I think now is the time when we stop concentrating on the defense more and more and start concentrating on the offense. And bringing automation in that aspect is like the biggest key right now. So I would leave at that note.
Fantastic. Yeah, I completely agree. I think cyber resilience is one of the hottest topics in our industry. And if red teaming can contribute to managing or mitigating any potential cyber risks that could manifest, especially sort of building on your point there about the dynamic threat landscape, absolutely worth the investment. So Oren, Hardeep, thank you so much for your time today and for your presentation. Thank you to the audience for joining, and we hope to see you all next time.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Bye.